We are still on the 5 aggregates of cleaning, and the last 2 talks I talked on what is perception and cleaning to perception. So when perception arises with the cleaning or attachment mind, they produces mental pain and suffering. So tonight I will talk on the wholesome mental states connected to the perception. In other words, making perception strong to help in the realization, in the enlightenment. So we have perception arises with the wisdom, with knowledge. Wisdom, I talk about wisdom, then we have the 3 levels of wisdom. The basic type of wisdom is the knowledge. We listen, we learn, and we understand what is right, what is wrong, what is mental states, what is perception, and what do we do about it. So these are all the knowledge. So we have this perception. In other words, we have listened to these talks, a few talks. Now you have these memories or perception of what is wholesome, what is unwholesome connected to this perception. Right? So that is knowledge. That is knowledge. Second level, of course, is you put it into practice. Put it into practice. You start putting your attention to the perception aggregates. In other words, experiential knowledge. You start to experience whether what you learn, what you have listened, is in accordance. Is the result when you practice, is it related, come about, is it the true things that you have learned, that you have the second level, the experiential knowledge, which is of course the deeper type of knowledge. And the third one is of course to the insight wisdom, the deep insight, not through thinking, not through analyzing, not through experimenting, but arises by itself. The knowledge that is just this knowing, it arises by itself. We call that self-realization or insight knowledge. What is this perception arises with? Knowledge. First we apply the knowledge that we learn. As you learn meditation, then you start. First important thing is to know the right way to meditate. Know the methods, how to meditate. And so through these 5 aggregates of cleaning, talk about the perception, that is cleaning produces fear and mental pain and suffering. Next, we are going to go deeper into perception itself, that we want to make it strong in order to help us, to help the meditator towards realization. I've said previously before, perception is neutral. It arises every moment of our consciousness. It arises together. and then they fall away together in that state of mind. So every state of mind that arises, there is this perception, whether the perception is the presence of perception or is the past perception, that is memories. That is memories. So, how do we develop to make these perceptions strong? Strong for realization. It arises with wisdom, so it becomes a wholesome perception. Now, in our meditation, we always train our mind to perceive the three characteristics of phenomena nature. The one is first one is the anicca. Anicca means the constant arising and disappearing of mind and body, or impermanence. So, this perception is important because strong perception brings out mindfulness. Now, if there is no this perception, then there would be no this mindfulness arising with regard to this practice of four foundation of mindfulness. So what do? We direct our attention and perceive this air element, the rising and falling and rising and falling. Then the perception goes away. It goes to memories, it goes to thinking of the past and the future. And the present perception then arises with the knowing, my mind is running away. I ought to bring it back. Otherwise I'm dreaming, I'm not meditating. So the present perception aligned brings back the object of rising and falling. Focus, direct the mind back to the rising and falling. And then the perception, the perceiving of this motion, air element, constantly changing. So, in our practice, we see the three parts, the beginning, the continue, and the end of the air element. We break it into the three parts. But as our mindfulness strengthens and our perception becomes more strong, concentration develops, then we see the whole process of this beginning, continuing, and end of the element. You could see the thousands of moments, some of them say millions of moments of this constant changing of air element, pushing until it stops. And then the softening, falling of this air element, it finds the belly becomes soft and not hard. When it's pushing, it's hard. When it's falling, it's soft. The earth element that is also arising in the air element that also assists in the objects. When you watch the air elements, there are other elements also assisting together. The four great elements, they cannot be separated. They are always there. It's our attention to see each one, which is the strongest. Why do we need to see this constant changing of our body, which is the element, the constant changing of our mind? As you meditate, you notice that our thoughts keep on changing. We think this, we think that. A lot of time, it keeps on changing to new objects and hopping and running, not staying still. moment it arises, then it falls away, new thoughts arise, then it arises, and it falls away, new thoughts arise. And it is so constant. Why do we need to see them? It's an important question. They are nature. They arise and they fall away. So what? Why is there a need to see them? To perceive, to develop our sanya, perception, to see this mind and body object internally and externally as well, external object, they're constantly changing. The mind normally would not want to see. The mind only wants to see interesting things. Mind wants to see pleasant things, lovely things. I do not want to see this changing. It does not bring a lot of pleasure, enjoyment to the mind. No, it's boring. As meditators knows, it is boring sitting there for half an hour just watching rise and fall. So boring. You don't get the enjoyment that you see in television. Why do you need to feel the air element? Would it not be better to go and have some nice food to eat? Or some music to listen to? So the mind do not want to see this change. The mind wants to see things that are pleasant, like this guy who came and see me. He says, I've been there, I've seen it, I've done it all. Life is worth living. He's getting very old and he says, well, I've done it all, I've seen it all, I'm so happy. Life is good to me. He travel here, he travel there, he goes sightseeing. He wakes up, he sleep until 11 and 12, wakes up, go for lunch, together with breakfast, eat, and then after that he go for a stroll, go for movies, or get into his series of television, and out for dinner. Life is so pleasant, and the children send him money. He's old, yep, he's sickly, but he thinks life is worth living. This is a good life. The mind focus on delightful things, on these things that is stress-free. Wakes up when he likes, eat what he likes, go for a stroll, go sightseeing. Life is so pleasant. And you say, Brother James, life is really worth living. Because the mind focus on the pleasant objects, external. It does not focus on the nature of mind and body and external that are constant changing. Perhaps we think that is better. That is what we should do. Why should we see the change? What does it bring us? Perhaps a lot of meditators don't experience spiritual joy. But this consciousness joy is instant. Instant Milo, instant Nescafe. Just pour hot water, you stir it, you drink it, and you enjoy it. But when you sit half an hour, and see how's the meditation all the day like that, not so, running around the mind. But when the mind constantly seek and see what is pleasure, the mind avoids seeing reality, avoids seeing the changing, just avoid. So in other words, he live a life that could be quite pleasant, trying to avoid the painful part, which mostly people do that, to avoid the suffering part, and to enlarge on the enjoyment part. So life becomes bearable when there are more enjoyment than pain. Unless there are more pain than enjoyment, then the mind will look for an escape. Mind will start doing what is necessary. Mind will go and pray. The mind will do whatever it is, so that he could get more of the enjoyment part that makes life bearable. So that is the rising and disappearing. That is the life without wisdom, without an escape from suffering, the real suffering that goes on and on and on. Life does not stop in death. It carries on. One life is very short, 50 years, 70 years, 80 years. It does not stop in death. It carries on. As a Buddhist, we believe in rebirth. Life carries on. Life is not just beginning and end in 50 years, or as a baby in the womb. It's beginning in the womb and end in the womb, and that's finished. No. It carries on. Then why do we need to see arising and disappearing? Because to develop that sanya, that perception, as you keep putting attention not just to the surface of life, the surface of what this mind and body is, external object, the reality that dominates the whole mind and body, the reality, the nature of this mind and body, internally, externally, they are constantly changing. Therefore, we could not hold on to the joy or pleasure or delights internally and externally, because it's changing all the time. Internally change, externally change. And if you cling on to this perception of delights, of enjoyment, then it produces dissatisfaction, it produces a lot of fear, hold on to something that constantly change. Insecurity arises, just as what we do. We lock our house, we make sure we lock everything all right, and we make sure that we put our money in a strong bank, that it don't go bankrupt. If you put in the wrong bank, next day you wake up, the bank go bankrupt, and so your money all gone. Why are you scared? Why are you have so much fear? Why must you keep on looking for a very strong bank? Because of changing. Today you see the bank, tomorrow is no more. Today you see your money in the bank, tomorrow no money there. Bank is disappeared, bank is gone. So when you hold on to something that constantly change, produces fear in our mind, that is what the attachment of perception brings suffering. But the perception of changing with wisdom, that you know, you put in the bank, okay, you think it is safe, but you should split the money, not just in one bank. Split it into 4 banks, 5 banks, 6 banks. If one bank goes broke, we still have money in the other bank. You see the change arises with the wisdom. See the changing. You're not scared of it. And you try to make the change better, because change is not only for the worse, change could also be for the better. Try to improve yourself, train up your meditation, develop your wisdom, make yourself more happy. Only when you start to see the change, that you can't hold on to things internally or externally, that you learn to detach the mind. Only when the mind is detached, there is freedom. There is no bondage, externally or internally. Mind is not trapped in fear, in clinging, in ignorance, because your mind knows When it changes, you're prepared for it. So when you're prepared, mind is more strong to take the change. If you're not prepared for it, the mind collapses when there is pain. When you suddenly lose all your money, people commit suicide. They just can't take it. Or they just lose their loved ones. They can't take it. They just kill themselves because they can't take it. They don't see change. They do not see the nature of change. Internally, externally, it's changing all the time. When they do not perceive, they have not built up the perception, the sanya of change. So it does not, the change, the wisdom connected to this perception of the change do not arises in the mind when they needed it. When they need wisdom to overcome suffering, there is no wisdom. Because they have not practiced, they have not developed, they have not made perception strong to see reality. So when they needed it, there's no help. Mind is weak, cannot withstand the reality. So when reality strikes, the mind collapses, because the mind is living in a make-believe world of himself. Just make his own world. He's just living in his own world of make-believe. What he wants to see, but not what is real. What is reality of phenomena? But they just want to leave the world that they think, make believe, that they created in their own mind, that makes them happy like an ostrich. When he's in danger, he run and he put his head and very deep into the sand, and he opened the eyes and he say, "Oh, the whole world is dark, nobody can see me. I am very safe." But the ostrich is not safe, because the whole body is outside the ground, only the head is inside. But just because he can't see, buried his head inside the ground, he can't see, it is darkness, does not mean that people can't see him, cannot see the ostrich. He's still in danger. Even if he thinks he's safe, he's still exposed. The whole body is still exposed outside. Perception with wisdom. So we do rising, falling, and I always say you must see the changing of this rising and falling. Don't just anchor on the rising and falling. You must see the changing. Make notes in your mind. There's rising, it stops. There's this falling, make note. There's this rising. It is not the same. It is different. It is changing. Make note. See the change. This rise and fall. See the change in the walking meditation. Lifting. There's a pushing. There's a dropping or touching. There's this change. There's this change in your thinking. It changes all the time. You're happy. You're sad. You're thinking of this. You're thinking of that. There's changing externally. People praise you, and so they scold you as well. Things you see, sometimes very pleasant, sometimes you see it's very unpleasant. You hear, you smell, you taste, you touch. These external objects. Sometimes you like the taste, sometimes you don't. When you eat another thing, it doesn't taste so nice anymore. These are the constant changing when the object touches the senses and touches different sense door. Constant moving, not stopping. But we think they stop, but they don't. They are forever rising and disappearing. And so we establish, we make this perception strong. But like I say, perception does not exist by itself. So there is this combination. Together, it arises with the perception and make it strong. So we have the knowing, we have the knowledge that this is the right way of practice. We should direct our mind to see nature, the true nature of things, the rising and disappearing, direction of the mind, the knowing, the mindfulness, be aware. And as you keep noting the object, the mindfulness constant, arising, then concentration becomes strong, and the concentration arises and becomes strong. And together, and concentration becomes strong, the mind becomes clear, perception becomes very clear, seeing reality becomes very clear. Due to what? We say clarity of mind, but the mental state is perception. Can perceive the object clearly. Every moment of arising, so clear. You could see the constant tick, 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 tick. And it falls down, it stops. And tick, 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 it goes up again, and stops. See not with the eye, but with the wisdom mind. Arises insight knowledge. For sure, there is no mistake. You have experienced it. You have perceived it clearly. You have perceived this air element, the body that is constantly changing. It's no mistake. It is true. You verify it. You experience it. Comes the insight knowledge, the strong conviction that arises in the mind. I have seen it. I have seen it. Some in the scripture they say, I'm enlightened, I'm enlightened. I've experienced it. I've experienced it. I've seen nature as it is. Because that perception of the changing that is so clear, the mind let go, because the mind knows he can't hold on to this rising and falling. He can hold on to things that are constant change. And when there is this letting go, the mind is released from attachment. The mind is released from attachment. The mind becomes detached. There's this freedom of mind. Call it enlightenment. The mind sees things as they really are. Mind is free from fear. Mind is free from clinging, which produces suffering. Mind is free from ignorance, because the mind sees reality, things as they really are. Mind is free from further clinging. Therefore, there is no more pain. And what arises is peacefulness, tranquility, and spiritual joy with contentment. Perceiving again the nature of dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. Now, how do we observe? How do we develop our sanya, perception or memories with regard to this dukkha, unsatisfactoriness? As you meditate, you would realize that what you order your mind to do, but it doesn't want to do. Order your mind to stay there. No, it runs away, wanders all over the place, goes into thinking that produces so much suffering, disappointment, Those into thinking that produce so much remorse, regret, and anger and frustration. You can't control your mind, you realize. What your mind you want to do does not do what you say, what you want. You want to develop good memories, but you become very forgetful. You make once your mind to be strong, but it is weak. You want to sleep, but you can't sleep. Mind is so unsatisfactory. What you want the mind to do, it will not do. You want it to be peaceful. You want it not to be disturbed. You want it to be free from all this mental pain. But you can't just order the mind. It is like he has a life of his own. But the truth is, the mind has a life of its own. Jivindriya. It has its own life force. You cannot control that mind life force. You cannot say, I want to think forever. I want this mind to survive for 1,000 years. You can't. You can't control. There is no I to control it. It has a life force of its own. And so is the body. The body has its life force of its own, which is different from the life force of the mind. Even when the mind dies, the body can survive for a long time. People who is not thinking anymore have an accident and in the hospital, but they could put all the vitamins, glucose and all that necessary into the body, and the body can still live for a long, long time. The hair can still grow, the fingernails can still grow, the body will still keep on aging until it collapses. It has its own life force. It is so unsatisfactory. Not only the mind, so is the body. Grow old, but we don't want it to grow old. Because we don't want to be weak, we don't want to be ugly and wrinkled and bended and no strength. We don't want to be sick because it is so painful to be sick. If you are sickly, it's so dukkha, it's so much suffering and pain. Lay down on the bed, you can't move around, you can't eat your food, you need help, people to look after you. We do not wish to die. We want to live long. We have a lot of unfinished business. One lifetime is not enough. But then, we can't control this body. There's no we to control these bodies. There's no I to control this body, which I say my body. It is a reality. It belongs to me. It is mine. But it is conceptual realities. Yeah? Conceptual realities. It is the realities that everybody agrees. We call them conventional realities. This is your car, this is my car, this is your house, this is my house. This is your money in the bank, this is my money in the bank. You should not steal my money. These are conventional realities. But ultimate realities, there's no I to control. It has a life force of its own. It depends on the reality, the phenomena, the constant changing. The moment we are born, so is the changing towards death. The moment we are born, we are walking towards the grave. Because that's the nature of things. It is impermanent, it's always changing, so it brings a lot of suffering. Only when the mind can perceive, build up that sanya, the perception of unsatisfactoriness of mind and body, that we let go of this mind and body. We do not cling to it. If The mind clings to this mind and body because it is so unsatisfactory, because it is laden with pain. So when the mind holds it, the mind holds the pain. And become dissatisfied, become fearful of death, become annoyed, irritated, restless. Building up that sanya, as you see this pain, don't run away from it. Don't avoid perceiving this pain. Don't ignore this pain. Don't try to replace it, this pain, by camouflaging it. But sanya, perception with wisdom, with knowing, mindfulness, by watching, building up the sanya, of seeing the unsatisfactoriness of this mind and body, the clinging disappear, the mind let go, detachment. When the mind let go, the mind is free from pain, connected to this mind and body, free from clinging to this mind and body. It is like when a house is on fire, and the resident in the house look at it. Oh, it's a big fire. And what do the resident in the house do? They run outside the house because it is burning. If they stay there, they get burned to death. They can't cling to the house because it is on fire. It is burning. It's turning to ashes. So they know they can't cling to the house. So what do? They run out of the house. They detach. And so, is this meditation on Dhammanupassana that we are cultivating the mindfulness not to cling like a house on fire. When I was young, I saw this man and he was catching catfish in the stream. The school behind. My school behind is a stream. And during recess, lunchtime, we finish our food, we have a lot of time, we go to the back of our school and we go near the river and we just enjoy ourselves there. It's peaceful. And we sort of chit-chat there, just sit around and relax. And we saw this man and he was in the river and he was wearing a swimming trunk and he was putting his hand the bank, where there's the bank, the river flows, and there are holes along the bank, and he put himself inside the hole, where there are holes. And from there, he grabs the catfish, and he pulls it up, and he throws it on the sand. And you could see the catfish there, struggling on the sand. And later, he will pick it up one by one. And just put his hand in, and he touched the catfish, but the catfish got thorns, two at the side and one at the back. But he's very skilled. He grabbed the head, pulls it up, and he throws it on the sand. And we saw he did the same thing again and again. And then suddenly he grabs another one and he pulled it out. It was a long snake. It was a snake. And he looked at it and it was a snake. And he threw it far, far away. It was a snake. It wasn't a catfish, it was a snake that was hiding in the hole as well. The same way, a meditator, when they are able to see the snake, as this man does, the meditator let go because it's a snake. It's a poisonous snake. If it bites you, you die. And so, the same way, a meditator, when he clings to this mind and body, suffer a lot of pain until you die. Keeps on going and going. There's no escape unless you let go. That's what we do in meditation. We develop that sanya, the perception. Builds up and make our perception strong. that this body, this mind, is latent, inherent, with a lot of pain, a lot of old age, suffering, and dying. Now, if you have this strong perception, and when we are affected by this reality, our mind is prepared for it. It is prepared for it. It is not caught by surprise, denial, fantasy, a world of make-believe, that we will never die, that we will live forever, that we will always be young and handsome, that we will always be strong and not sick. No, it is just something make-believe that we want to put into our mind so that we would not have to see the reality of this mind and body. We do not want to see the unpleasant part of this mind and body. We prefer to live in ignorance, in hallucination. And so the saying goes that if you do not know, it is a blessing. It is not so. If you do not know, it is not a blessing. Do not know. It is suffering. Only thing is waiting for the time for suffering to come. When you see it face to face and you can't run away from it, it becomes a reality. And the person wail and cry and lament, couldn't accept the reality when they come face to face with it. And so there is enormous suffering and pain. So much pain and suffering if we can't face the truth. So, this sanya, this perception, even though we have these many pleasant type of perception to this body, we do enjoy a lot of things to see, smelling, tasting, touching. But we should not forget the reality, the inherent reality. Even though when we're enjoying, we do know that it is not forever, right? It is always changing. We have to learn to accept reality. That's when the mind becomes strong. Half the battle is won if there's acceptance. And if the mind do not accept, then it is a lot of pain when it happens. Perception does not arise by itself, as I have mentioned. We must learn to have right view, right understanding of knowledge, the basic knowledge of how to apply it, how to make it strong. We need to direct our mind to see things as they really are. Don't try to escape. Don't try to close your eye like an ostrich. Don't try to run away from it. Try to develop the sanya, the perception, make it strong. That this is reality. We need mindfulness. And when it is constantly applied, mind gets concentrated, means that it becomes very strong. Together with the perception, when the mindfulness is strong, concentration becomes strong. And when the mind becomes very clear, perception becomes very strong and clear. That is where insight is. There's no insight without right perception. There will be no attainment without right perception. So therefore, perception, when it arises with clinging, arises with attachment, brings a lot of suffering. But perception, again the same perception, when it arises with wisdom, when you know how to deal with this perception, how to build it, make it strong for realization. But if you make this perception strong in the unwholesome with cleaning, then it brings a lot of suffering. So do not make the perception strong in the unwholesome. If you keep on bringing back bad memories of the past, every time you bring up bad memories of the past, it registered into your mind. You bring it up, it registered. Every time it registered, it makes perception stronger and stronger and stronger. What happens when perception becomes strong? When it is unwholesome, it keeps on arising. That's what it does as resultant consciousness. Then it keeps arising as object in your mind. And when it keeps on arising and it is strong, it catch hold of the mind. The object control the mind, not mind control object. Object control mind. Aramana pacaya. Object control mind. And when it control mind, brings bad memories, bad sanya, bad perception, cause a lot of pain. And keep remembering about the past that is so painful. And the past has become the present sanya, present perception. The past that is not real has become real because you bring it to the present moment and continue in the present reality, present moments, present thinking, present thoughts. So is the present pain. So not only you experience pain in the past, you experience pain in the present. And if you do not neutralize the perception, the memories, then it carries on to the future. Some of them carries the pain until they die. And even the dying moment, they are so full of remorse and regret. During the last moment, even the last moment when they die, they are still mentally inflicted with a lot of mental pain, a lot of sadness and remorse, anger, frustration. This is an important subject because it is reality. Whether you want it or not, it is going to stay with us. This perception. So we should not run away from it. We should learn. We should investigate. We should see the nature of this perception so that we can handle it. If you handle this perception, it plays a great part in our mind, our mental formation. You are able to handle this perception. You can do a great part of handling your mind. Because this perception, if it is unpleasant, it brings upon suffering. But if this perception, which is pleasant, brings about happiness. So, need to be aware of these memories, this perception, so that you are able to do something about it. Note it in our meditation practice. We recognize it and we just name it. Perception of the past. Unpleasant perception, unpleasant memories. Knowing. Just note it. Let it sink with knowing. So, when the mind dies off, when the mental formation passes away and it sinks into the registration, it sinks with what? with knowing. Even though the perception is unpleasant, it is painful, but it sinks, it registered into our mind, our memories, with knowing. So when it arises with knowing, and the meditators recognize, perception. Why? Because you register it with knowing. So when unhappy memories arises, it arises with knowing. Perception. It arises again in the mind, knowing, let go. Then we are practicing Dhammanupassana on the 5 aggregates of cleaning. So now, as you look into perception, and you note it, you let it go, then you're practicing Dhammanupassana on the 5 aggregates of cleaning. So, slowly you have less and less suffering, less and less pain as you have less and less cleaning to perception, as you learn to take things as they come, together with the knowing of arising and disappearing, whatever. When the object is not pleasant, it doesn't matter, because the nature of the object, internally or externally, when they arise, they have to cease, because that is the nature. So, when they arise, it doesn't matter. If somebody criticizes you, it doesn't matter. If you see something not pleasant, it doesn't matter, because it don't stay there forever. It arises, it disappears. When you taste something not to your taste, it doesn't matter, because you don't have to go there and eat the same food again. It doesn't matter. When you grow old, for that is part of life. It's the nature of this body, the arising, the growth, the decay, the separation of the element. It's just the nature. And after that arises a new mind and body. Then you leave behind the old. And so is the old mind, the old body. A renewal process of a new mind and a new body. And life goes on and on and on. And you try to accumulate wisdom as much as possible until liberation, till Makapala, perfect fruition. So, I've talked about the perception arises with wisdom, and there are also perception arises with loving kindness. If you bring up the loving kindness in your mind and let it register with knowing that it is good to be kind, because of the resultant is so good. When you're kind to somebody, you get a lot of kindness in return, and it's so pleasant, so happy. People are kind to you. It says when you are kind to other people, they're so happy, blissful. So the same way, when you develop this perception that we do to all beings, to yourself, including loved ones. So whenever you see your loved ones, and if your perception is strong on loving kindness, then it constantly arises in your mind, constantly think of your loved ones with kindness, then you start to be kind to them, and the family becomes very happy, and what you spread around comes back to you. And when the family is very happy, and so are you. Because when you make them happy, in return they make you happy too. So that is always the cause and effect. Right? So I will stop my talk tonight, and Could you say sadhu 3 times? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Any question?